Well, the NCAA Council submitted recommendations which would increase the NCAA tournament to roughly 90 teams. How much of an absolute disaster would this be for the sport that we all love?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up? Welcome to the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Andy Patton, and I'm thrilled to be joined here today by Leif Thulin of the Locked On NBA Big Board. Leif and I are going to discuss a wild couple of days in college basketball, but we're going to start talking about the latest report on a hot topic across the sport. This has been discussed pretty much at length since over the summer. I remember a lot of conversations about it back then. That is, of course, the potential expansion of the NCAA tournament. Personally, it's hard for me to imagine a more perfect sporting event than the NCAA tournament as it is right now. The NCAA Council, which includes SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, who has kind of spearheaded this movement, they made recommendations that would include the sports playoffs throughout the NCAA to be about 25% of the teams that participate for the NCAA tournament. That would mean roughly 90 teams in participation in the big dance. Leif, this has been going around for a while. I'm sure you've heard the conversation long before yesterday when this council recommendation came out. I'm curious kind of your thoughts on a potential expansion to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't love the idea of it at all because I think if I think of the best tournament setting there is, it's March Madness. Like it's quick. It happens. There's the excitement's boiled up because of the duration of the tournament. If you were to add more stages and what I would call meaningless games, I know anything could happen, and there's going to be an even more improbable upset. But I love March Madness, and maybe call me a traditionalist, and that's fine. But there's nothing wrong with the tournament. And in fact, if I were to make one tweak, if you were to say like Leif, you have to make one tweak to current March Madness, I would take out the first four.
Yeah,
like that's the only tweak I can possibly make. You still same number of rounds for just about every team. You still have to win 6 games to win the tournament. You get 32 automatic qualifiers, and you get 32 at large teams. And instead of getting 36 at large teams, I think it's the perfect tournament. Like I said this, and I actually was talking to my friends about this last night. We were just talking about basketball as I was at the Jazz game. And I said, there's no more perfect event than the 3 days that finalize a conference tournament. You got Selection Sunday. You skip a few days and you go Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of the opening rounds of the March Madness. And like you can take out the first 4 in between there, and I'm in heaven. Like that's a 7-day stretch, my favorite 7-day stretch of the year. If they change March Madness, I'll be depressed. So I think you got to keep it the same.
I'm with you on every single facet of that. I love that week so much because even the few days off are just spent staring at my bracket and trying to figure out what changes I might want to make. There are certainly some people who will advocate for the strength of the 4 play-in games, and obviously we've seen some teams win a play-in game and then go on a torrid stretch. I think the most notable team is, of course, that 2021 UCLA squad that had Jalen Suggs not hit a 39-footer, might have gone all the way to the national championship game. I understand why people might point to that and say, look, we should keep this. And I'm not going to, like you said, if I had to make a change, maybe I'd get rid of that. I'm kind of a traditionalist in the 64-team field as well. I don't necessarily hate the 68-team field. I don't hate the play-in games. I think it's fine. I think it's a little superfluous, I think is the best way to put it. But again, when you've had a few teams go on deep runs, so I can understand why people might want to keep it. I could even understand why some people might say, well, what if we do 72 and we put a few more games in? I'm not in favor of that. I think just continually chipping away and making slight changes constantly just feels unnecessary. But I would be in favor of that if the other alternative is going all the way to 96 teams, which I know that Joe Lunardi at ESPN has ran a ton of simulations on what a 96 team bracket would look like. He kind of had a thread about it on Twitter yesterday and just said basically the conclusion was that it's a disaster. It's just a complete mess. You have a bunch of bad teams in the field. It just kind of dilutes the whole product. I think that's the big thing too, is so many sports are struggling with trying to figure out how do we not completely dilute our regular season. And I feel like if you're putting 25% of the teams in the 25% of the D1 teams, when effectively 30 or so percent are just not good, they're bad mid-major programs. And I'm an advocate for mid-major basketball. I love mid-major basketball, but there's a whole bunch of teams that aren't going to even sniff the playoffs. They're not even going to sniff potentially making the NCAA tournament. And then if you're going to increase the field to 96, then basically every team who's even decent has a pretty good chance. And I just don't feel like that's really in the spirit of what you want out of a regular season, what you want out of competition from November to March or November to February. And I know that there's already an argument that maybe college basketball's regular season is a little bit diluted and people aren't paying attention until January anyway because of football. And there have been lots of conversations about, do we move back the start of the season and et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I don't see how any of college basketball's current issues, which I don't think are that prevalent, would be solved by expanding the NCAA tournament. It doesn't seem like it's going to fix really anything that are problems in the sport right now.
Yeah, I think the notion that would be the positive take on this. So if you're a team that's typically a mediocre team in your conference that rarely gets the top 4 in your conference,
right?
And you're 8 through 10 in a big conference like the SEC, like so Greg Sankey's gonna be pushing for, because I think he has the most depth of any team in the country right now,
right?
Or any conference in the country.
Sure.
So now you say, well, why can't a team like, for instance, Florida this year, like that seems like a bubble team that's got more talent than some teams that are going to make the tournament probably because they're in a stronger conference. I understand that, but that said, you can't dilute the field by saying we're going to add 20 teams more or less, like by just because there's going to be 1 or 2 teams that are better than others. Like here's a good example. I don't like Duke whatsoever. But Duke was by far a better team than some of the teams that made the tournament when Duke didn't make it because they got the COVID after beating Louisville in the ACC tournament. Mark Williams had 22 and 19. That would have been a terrifying 10 seed. Like they weren't a good team, but that would have been one of the like worst 10 seeds like to have in your bracket that you could imagine. But I don't think they deserved it. One of my best friends is a Duke fan that has watched every game for years and years and years. And he agreed with me. Like he said, I believe that we were good enough to be in this, but I don't think we deserved it. And I think that's anyone who's watched college basketball long enough and has an appreciation for the way they've ran it appreciates how amazing an event that March Madness is. Like there are no sporting events that really draw the same immediate attention for how well it's ran and how engaging it is from start to finish as March Madness. So I'm fully on board of keeping it the same. And if there were to be a change, like I mentioned, I'd almost reduce the field. But that said, I love basketball, so 68 is fine with me.
Yeah, I'm with you on all of that. And I think one of the only pros that I could see if they were to do it this way, which to be clear, they are not, would be to add more potential mid-major teams, like teams that win their regular season in their conference and then lose in the conference tournament. And since they're like auto one bid leagues, those teams don't make it. That's not who Greg Sankey wants to add to the NCAA tournament. He's very transparent about that. He's trying to pigeonhole, those Florida teams or, big like Northwestern, like 500-ish Big Ten teams, and like more of those teams and the same number of mid-major teams just doesn't interest me. Frankly, more mid-major teams still doesn't really interest me in the sense that I'd rather just keep it as is. But knowing that if they do expand it, it's not going to be the little guys who get the bump. It's going to be more of these big Power 5 programs that just had mediocre to even bad regular seasons. And that's just not interesting to me. I just don't want to see those teams get that opportunity when, like you said, using the Duke example, they didn't earn it. Well, Leif, Tuesday gave us a pair of very interesting results. Kansas State dropped 116 points on Texas on the road at the Moody Center. Pitt polished off Virginia after beating North Carolina earlier in the week. We're going to discuss if those two teams are legit contenders or if they are pretenders. But first, today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by BetOnline. College basketball and the NBA are back in action. College football bowl season is just wrapping up. And of course, the NFL is getting into the playoff picture. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports information, from all the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it. BetOnline remains the best spot for all the latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. They even have lines for coaching changes across every major sport, so even in the offseason, you can get your fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, segment 2, still Eddie Patton, still Locked On College Basketball here. I want to thank all of you for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen of the day. For your second listen today, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. All right, Leif, we are doing our weekly contenders or pretenders segment here, and Tuesday's slate of games gave us a couple incredible opportunities to talk about some surprising results. We got to start talking about this ridiculous performance put on by Kansas State over Texas at the Moody Center. 116 points on the road. A few fun facts before we talk about this team. That is the most wins on the road by an unranked team over a top 10 team in the AP era. That goes back to 1948. The Wildcats shot 60% from the field. They shot 54% from three. They shot 94% from the free throw line. They're the third team in the last decade to put up those numbers and also 115 plus points in a game. The last two teams that did it were Utah against Mississippi Valley State. Florida State did it against Nicholls State. Kansas State did it against Texas, one of the top 10 teams in the country, a borderline top 5 team. The 1.41 points per possession was the most Texas has ever surrendered in the Ken Pom era. Leif, what were your thoughts on this game, and really what are your thoughts about this Kansas State team who has been quite solid all season long, but I'm not sure anybody expected them to do this here on the road?
Yeah, scoring 58 points in the first half at Texas, and this is, I mean, you're very familiar with this. When Texas played Gonzaga at that arena, it was jumping, it was rocking, and it was impossible to get the ball in the post at Drew Timme. So Kansas State gets Jerome Tang, and he's made an immediate flip of the switch. Like, this was a bottom dweller in the Big 12. They lose their best player, Nigel Pack goes to Miami. And they flip the switch and they bring in transfers. The whole team's made up of transfers, a new coach, and they've come together and put together one of the more cohesive identities of any team in the Big 12, other than a team like Kansas, who's kind of plug and play. Bill Self's been there forever, a lot of returners, even if they're taking larger responsibilities. And it's really impressive. A few stats, like you mentioned a few, and I had a few. Kansas State's number 31 in Ken Pom. They're 37th in offense and 42nd on defense. And that's a recipe to get into the big dance. Like, if you do the mathematics on how to get in, there's going to be 32 at large, automatic qualifiers, 36 at large bids. There's going to be some automatic qualifiers that would have made it as at large. So, and then there's going to be some bid stealers. So they're a team, to me, that right now is on the inside, like just inside of the bubble. If they lose a few, they'll end up on the bubble. But that's something I wouldn't have expected. Like, preseason, I thought I was higher on Kansas State than most because I just took a leap of faith. I was like, man, I really like what Jerome Tang's being told, like what I've been told he's responsible for at Baylor. And that part of the system and the culture at Baylor under Scott Drew was something that Jerome Tang implemented. And I just kind of took a leap of faith and was higher. But that said, I had no delusions or I thought I was not disillusioned into believing that there would be a top 5 team in the Big 12.
Yeah,
I will tell if they are, but like the fact that they're close is really remarkable. And that said, I will posit I've got some concern for Texas now. That was their core. That was never going to leave in the way. Like, you could see offensive droughts, but giving up that many points, 58.5 is really alarming. Yeah, like, especially in a first half. Like, there's this feeling out period in a basketball game. And they haven't played the conference games really yet. Texas squeaked one out at Oklahoma, and you got to feel good coming back to home and trying to get a good start playing Kansas State. So, to answer your question in a long-winded way, I'm high on Kansas State. I can't push myself to say they're a contender, but I think they're in contention to make the tournament, which is as much as anyone, and maybe even more than anyone could have anticipated for the people in Manhattan, Kansas.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I love the additions that Kansas State has made. Keontae Johnson has been just awesome for this team. He's been super, super efficient, 57.5% from the field, just under 41% from deep. Marquise Noel has been awesome as well. He had 36 points. I think it was on 14 shots as well against Texas in this game. A really, really nice performance from those two guys. This team is absolutely on the up and up. Yeah, I guess it depends on your definition of contender. Do we think this team's going to make the big dance? Yeah. And do I think they could pull an upset in the big dance? Yeah. Do I see them as an Elite 8, Sweet 16 even team? Probably not. I mean, you never know once you get into the big dance. Crazier things have certainly happened, but I do think that this kind of exposes a lot of the issues that Texas has had this year. They're only a 2-loss team. Texas doesn't have. They have 2 good wins. They have a very nice win over Gonzaga, which has aged well, as we've seen that Gonzaga was pretty rough at the beginning of the year, has shaped out better lately. Creighton, that was a nice win at the time. They were number 7 in the country. That doesn't look as good now. They have a loss to Illinois, and they've been good throughout the season. They've blown out a lot of teams that they should be blowing out, but I'm not 100% sold that this team is necessarily going to be where a lot of people had them. They have some inconsistency from beyond the arc. They have some inconsistency defensively, certainly giving up 116 points in this one. Yeah, Kansas State had a monstrous game. But at the end of the day, like, you can't give up 58 points in the first half at home. Like, that's not a recipe for success. So I'm not sure. I think Texas is a full-on pretender, but this is the kind of game that makes me a lot more hesitant about, hey, is this one of those teams that could face an upset in the second round that might not even make the Sweet 16? I think it's possible.
Yeah, I think, I know I was, and I talked to Isaac about this on one of our episodes, that Texas was like a slam dunk to be one of my best 4 teams in the country. Like, early in the season, it was hard to say that they weren't the best team in the country. There's regression. There's things that happen for teams positively and negatively. So I wasn't going to say slam dunk they're the best team, but they were easily a Final Four contender. And right now, I'm with you. Like, if things don't change, they're Sweet 16 bound.
Yeah.
Like, and I believe they can. They've got a backcourt that's dynamic. They've got experience and possessions that matter. But I think this speaks more to Kansas State's ability to score in a prolific fashion than it did to Texas's defense, even though Texas's defense was atrocious to go 58, no matter what you say. Like, it's pretty hard to do that. But I think they can rebound, and I think Kansas State's kind of just getting a taste of what they can do. And now this is a confidence booster going into the Big 12 play and having a couple wins under their belt. This kind of they scrapped one out against Bob Huggins and company, and they're able to win this game that they probably shouldn't have. And now then they earn a game that no one expected them to win, and they deserved every bit of it. And so I think they're going to have full-on confidence. And the one thing is, a lot of these teams that have talent and they're kind of put together like a jigsaw puzzle, you don't know exactly what pieces are going to go where, but you find it out, is they typically don't close games well. Kansas State's been really good at winning close games this year. The only one they've only lost one game. That was to Butler at Butler. That's a tough game, even though Butler's not a particularly good Big East team. But they've been able to win games that I wouldn't say they necessarily should have early in the year. And I kind of started to believe in them more and more. Like, they beat LSU, who's a decent SEC team in a close game. And they've been able to, when the runs have been stemmed, they make good offensive surges. They've been able to back it up with their defense. So I think that the fact that they're pretty evenly ranked in KenPom offensively and defensively encourages me about Kansas State's future. And I think if the tournament started today, they'd be in, and I think they will make it, but I don't want to say definitively.
Absolutely. Well, I want to switch over to the ACC a little bit, talk about the really, really good week that the Pittsburgh Panthers have. Wins over number 24 ranked North Carolina. We know North Carolina has been pretty up and down this year, and maybe there was some expectation that, hey, maybe that was more about North Carolina, less about Pitt. But then Pitt turned around and beat Virginia, which is obviously a pretty nice victory. Right now, the Panthers are 4-0 in ACC play. I think there's a argument that this says maybe more about the ACC than Pitt, but I am curious what your thoughts are after seeing this team put together a really nice streak of games last week.
Yeah, this was confusing for me because North Carolina and Virginia are, I think, the 2 most talented teams in the. Well, obviously Duke is supremely talented, but they don't have as much experience as the other 2. And I think that the North Carolina game, there was an element of luck for Pittsburgh.
Sure.
I think that the shooting that they got from Hinson, and especially the one shot that was a prayer and he drained it, was you need luck to win big games. So I think there's an element of luck, but all good teams need that. But I do think Jeff Capel's putting together a good group, like Hinson, Burton, Sabande, and Cummings kind of have put together a quartet that you're going to get certain points from. Now, can they get stops? And that's where playing a team like Virginia, who's very good, and they're going to have a good record. They're going to finish in the top 20 of the rankings, probably in the top 15. That's where playing them is a bit misleading because they're susceptible to upsets. It's not like the team they had with DeAndre Hunter, Ty Jerome, and Kyle Guy, where at the end of the game, it's really, really hard to beat them because they can score at a high level, and defensively, you're not going to score. This team can keep you from scoring, but offensively, even though they started the year with this like offensive 3-point explosion, once you go into the ACC play and play like athletes that know your rhythm, your patterns, it's hard to score when you're playing the mover blocker and some of your guards, and especially your best guard who's able to put pressure on the rim is playing hampered with an injured hamstring, and that's Reese Beekman. So I will say there's a bit of luck for Pittsburgh, but I'm impressed with what Jeff Capel's brought together and the culture of winning. And this is something that you'll hear repeatedly with me throughout this year and beyond is I think winning is something that you can learn. There's habits of winning that become learned, and these teams become good in close games. I think Pittsburgh's becoming one of those teams that has a knack for getting into these type of tight games, and the more they practice it, the better they're going to get. So I'll answer with I think it's luck, but I don't think it's like the ACC's as bad as maybe that people maybe listening think it is. But I think that these are good matchups for Pittsburgh to win early in the year because Virginia lets you stay in games by playing their slow pace, because North Carolina is searching for an identity and they closed with a lineup they'd never closed with before. And those shots were really improbable that fell. So props to Pittsburgh, but I'm not quite as far sold on them as I am for Kansas State. I think they're in the similar boat. Like if it started today based off being 4-0 in the ACC, you probably are in, but I'm going to hold my horses before giving my evaluation.
Well, Leif, there are so many big games coming up this weekend, and for those who like to see or those who like to wager on upsets, cannot miss our final segment of the show, Upset Watch. Before we get into that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and calories, then you have got to try Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. If you're like me, where you want to eat healthier but you don't want to compromise taste, then man, I've got just the thing for you. You got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious, and you won't think they're good for you. They are perfect for your New Year's resolutions. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they are covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and even coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is they are healthy, healthy, healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. All right, segment 3 here. Still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball, still here chatting with Leif Thulin of the Locked On NBA Big Board, and we are on Upset Watch here. We're talking about a few games coming up this weekend where we think the ranked team could end up losing to an unranked opponent, or in some cases, just a favored team that might end up losing. I'm going to start us off here with the game on Saturday morning, 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, 1:30 on the East Coast. That is the number 14 Wisconsin Badgers at Illinois. And quite honestly, if you look at some of the predictive models right now, they have, I think ESPN has Illinois as a 70.5% chance of winning this game. So it's almost unfair to call this an upset, but Wisconsin is for some reason the number 14 ranked team in the country. KenPom doesn't like them as much as they like Illinois. I think KenPom has Wisconsin 49th. Illinois is 28th for reference there. Wisconsin has kind of just benefited by not losing any particularly bad game, which has allowed them to kind of vault into the rankings. Kevin Sweeney at Sports Illustrated wrote a really great article recently about the kind of flaws in the AP poll and the way that voters kind of choose to make votes. And he alluded to Wisconsin being a team that probably doesn't deserve to be where they are, but enough slander on the Badgers. I think Illinois is a really, really good defensive team, borderline top 25 in the entire country. Winning Big Ten games on the road is really, really hard. All of that, plus the fact that I don't think Wisconsin is all that good. They take good care of the basketball. They're a good outside shooting team. I don't think there's, it's certainly not impossible for them to win this one, but I think I have a pretty good feeling that the Illinois team here is going to take this one and potentially finally push Wisconsin back towards where they belong in the rankings.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That was one I had on my notes as well. I'll stick with the Big Ten. I think a team that right now is starting to, I won't say spiral, but I think they're showing some flaws is Purdue. They lost by 1 at Mackey Arena to Rutgers. I think they're in line for another loss this weekend.
Yeah.
The one that I think they'll lose is at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
Penn State plays small ball, shoots the lights out when they're on. Obviously, who knows if they'll shoot the lights out against the Boilermakers. But if they do, I think that presents problems. Obviously, Zach Edey's a big fella, and they're going to have trouble guarding him. But everyone in the country is. And I think the scars of trying to play through a big very late in the shot clock and in crunch time and having him be the creator reared its ugly head. And then the other game that Purdue's playing, and I'll just kind of hedge my bet here. I wanted to go with the Penn State, but Ohio State is in Columbus playing Penn State, so it's going to be a difficult stretch for Penn State. And I believe they're going to try to rebound, and they know they're a really good basketball team, and losing 2 in a row is pretty hard to do when you're a really good basketball team. But that said, the Big Ten's a gauntlet. Playing in Columbus is difficult. Zed Key is a problematic big to play against because he can play inside. He can step out a little bit. Ohio State's got guys. Chris Holtman's a good coach. Let's see how Matt Painter adjusts against Ohio State and Penn State. So I'll put the Boilermakers on upset watch.
Yeah, I was considering that one as well. I think it's hard. Like you said, it's hard to lose multiple games in a row, and they're going to come out very motivated. But that's a really tough stretch of games that they got to deal with. I'm going to move over to the Big East. I'm going to take a game that, again, preseason wouldn't have looked like a game that we would have on upset watch, at least not the direction that we have it on here. And that is number 18, Xavier, at Villanova on the road against the Wildcats. Of course, Villanova has had a disappointing season. Injuries. Cam Whitmore has only recently returned. The star freshman for them, Justin Moore, has yet to return for this team. That impacted them significantly. Really disappointing performance for this team in the Phil Knight Invitational. We have seen them kind of rebound ever since then. I think Xavier's a very, very good team. I've watched quite a bit of them this year. I do think they deserve to be a top 20 ranked team, but Big East on the road playing at Villanova. I think this is going to be a tough game. Xavier's not a great defensive team. They're a top 10 offensive team per Ken Pom, but they're only 76th in adjusted defense. Villanova, frankly, also struggles defensively, so this game could be up first to 85, might win this one. Heck, it might be first to 90 that wins this one. There's no current update on Justin Moore's status. He has been returning to practice very recently. I would be surprised if he made it back for this game. I think if he was going to play in this game, we probably would have already heard it by now, but certainly that would change the dynamic here. I also think we're starting to see Cam Whitmore find his groove. He hasn't been particularly efficient as a scorer just yet. He's only played 7 games. He's only playing about 23 minutes a night. I think as he gets more acclimated to Villanova's offense, gets more kind of adjusted to what they're trying to do under Coach Kyle Neptune, I could see Nova pulling this one off and sending Xavier home with a loss that they really, really didn't want to take after such a strong start to the season in Big East play.
Yeah, I think this was one that was certainly on my monitor as well. The thing that you nailed on the head for me in this matchup is Villanova can be kind of prone to get stagnant this year, which is weird to say about a Villanova team after years and years of like associating with some of the best ball movement. But against Marquette, there was stretches where Nova looked like they were the better team, and then they had these moments where they couldn't penetrate it at all, and they'd shoot like a desperation bailout 3 almost, and get like late rotations, and it'd be Eric Dixon face up 3, or, and then Chris Archidiakono shooting a last second 3. That said, Xavier isn't as good a defensive team as some of these teams that they've played. Like they've played UConn and Marquette. Those two are really good defensive teams. So I think there's upset opportunity because one, Nova knows how to win. There's the culture of winning there. There is a desperation, and they're playing at home. Xavier's on a really high, like that's a high of a season, beating the number 2 team in the country on your home court, and now you go play at a hostile environment. So that's one I really liked as well. And one to close us out. This one is an interesting one because Iowa, looking towards the season, you'd have said, okay, yeah, they can cover their home court and beat Indiana. Like that doesn't seem like a crazy thing. Right now, Iowa looks pretty poor, and Patrick McCaffrey is out because he's dealing with some anxiety. So hopefully a key piece of that team gets back and feels better and is able to go for the critical stretch of Big Ten play. But Indiana, this is more of a buy low or not buy low, sell high on Indiana. Indiana's ranked highly, but I don't think they're terribly impressive. And they also have an injury to their point guard, Xavier Johnson. I think I was able to shoot the ball pretty well. Indiana's able to condense a floor and make it shrink. But at home, I think Iowa's got a chance to push it. This one is my least confident of the ones we've discussed, but I thought I'd toss it out there because playing at Carver Hawkeye is difficult. Carver Hawkeye is known to be loud. They play fast. Crazy things happen in that building. And Indiana can be a team that runs into droughts offensively. So if you can find a good team that has the chops to be good offensively against a team that is pretty poor offensively. They just have a good defense and one star player in the interior, and one of their top scorers is out. That I smell a little bit of an upset there. There's a possibility.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. We got some upsets for you to keep an eye on out over this weekend. That is going to do it for us today. Thanks to Leif for joining as always. Don't forget to check out the Locked On College Basketball podcast on YouTube. Go hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. More fantastic content coming on Friday. And again, as we get into next week with the potential new number 1 team after Purdue's loss against Rutgers. For now, though, peace out.